I love history. Unfortunately, it's all around me. And today, we're here at the Wayside Inn to talk a little bit about Henry Ford and his impact on this area. Henry Ford was a revolutionary thinker. He grew up on a farm in Michigan, but he was obsessed with mechanization from an early age. So if you've been watching me, you know I love history, and a little bit of Henry Ford's history lives right here in my own backyard. He moved to the city and began to tinker, and over time became obsessed with the emergence of the automobile. And he saw a role for that automobile in transforming this country. He wanted to make automobiles available to the masses, and he reflected back to his youth on that farm when he felt isolated, and this really drove him to think out of the box and do something that nobody thought could be done at the time. Henry Ford's business interests expanded. He became an exceedingly wealthy man, and he really wanted to figure out a way to bring the wealth creation that was happening in his factories back into rural America. And he set his sights here in Sudbury on doing just that. He never lost sight of where he came from, and he wanted to create this utopian society in small town America. So Henry Ford turned his attention here to Sudbury, Massachusetts. He purchased the Wayside Inn and 60 acres of property in 1923 for about $60,000, and he continued to buy land until he held about 3,000 acres of land here in Sudbury. He had this notion of building a historical village and museum, and he set out to do that. The Wayside Inn was established back in 1716. It's believed to be the oldest continually operating inn in the country, and of course, it's on the National Register of Historic Places. The Wayside Inn is known as Longfellow's Wayside Inn. It's named in honor of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who wrote a book of poems called Tales of the Wayside Inn, which was based on a stay that he had here at this very inn back in the 19th century. In order to preserve the historical nature of the inn, Henry Ford spent $300,000 to move 1.5 miles of Route 20, known as the Boston Post Road, further away from the inn. He did this in 1926, and then in 1928, he sold that road to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for $1. In 1927, Henry Ford found this schoolhouse, this red stone schoolhouse, in nearby Sterling, Massachusetts. He had the schoolhouse moved here to the Wayside property, and contrary to local folklore, this is not the schoolhouse from Mary Had a Little Lamb, although people continue to say that to this day. And if you're wondering where that folklore comes from, well, it helps to have this plaque of the Mary Had a Little Lamb poem posted right here on the Wayside property. Henry Ford approached the Sudbury School Committee with an offer. In 1927, he offered to fund the salary for the teacher, the supplies, and the transportation to operate this one-room schoolhouse here on the Wayside property. This school was operated for the children of the people that worked on the property and then also in the surrounding area. And Sudbury took him up on this offer, and they operated this schoolhouse from 1927 all the way up until 1951. Ford opened the Wayside Inn School for Boys to train troubled youth for eventual employment in his factories. In fact, boys from the school helped build the Martha Mary Chapel with trees damaged by the 1938 hurricane. It is named after Ford's mother and mother-in-law and opened in 1940. Now, Henry Ford lived at an amazing time. He was born in 1863, and he grew up and saw the country move from an agriculturist society and into an industrial world that moved from water to steam, to industrial combustion, and electricity to power the industrialization of this country. So of course, when he thinks back to a utopian New England village, he thinks about an old grist mill like this that's water powered. And of course, he had that built here on the site in the 1920s. Henry Ford built a working grist mill on the property, which continues to be operable to this day. He also attempted to build a reservoir by constructing a large 30-foot tall stone dam. This effort failed widely and is known locally as Ford's Folly. This video marks Henry Ford's involvement in the Wayside Inn specifically, and Sudbury, Massachusetts in general. It is not intended to glorify everything that Henry Ford did in his life. While he was a brilliant industrialist, he was a flawed man nonetheless. He was largely ignorant of US and world history and an avowed anti-Semite, openly blaming Jews for many of the world's problems. Henry Ford remained involved here in Sudbury until he died in 1947, although he failed on a large scale to transform Sudbury into a large industrial manufacturing center for Ford Motor Company. He did in 1930 retreat back here to Wayside and really focus on preservation, and we're thankful for what he leaves behind. It's beautiful, and this is a beautiful town, and this is a beautiful part of the United States.